Hi, I'm Patrick Daigle, fly tyer for Umpqua Feather Merchants and fly fishing guide for Blue Ribbon Flies. Working through a PFD parachute for you today. I'm going to take you step by step through this pattern that I created a few years ago, and thankfully Umpqua was kind enough to pick it up commercially. So to start, the hook here is a 2488. This will be a 14. And the thread here is going to be a brown 8/0 thread. You can see the trailing shuck that I'm tying in currently here. This will be a mayfly brown. And we'll go from that shuck to our rib, which is a fine, ultra fine copper wire. And now for my abdomen, I'll use a PMD emerger Xenon dubbing, which can be found here at the shop. We don't need it to be too thick, so less is generally more. And we're looking to dub this just above the hook point. We don't want to go too far with it. We want to leave some room ultimately for the foam PFDs that we'll be tying in here shortly. So I'll be winding this abdomen forward, tapering it as usual. I like this dubbing because it's got just enough spike to it. Alright, so we got it just behind the hook point. You can use the thread there as a reference point. I'll counter wrap with a fine, ultra fine copper wire again. And what's great about this fly is you can ultimately change up the color of the body. You can use a rib or no rib for that matter, whichever suits your needs. And for the PFD, the two foam strips that I'll be using on either side of the foam or the parachute here is I'm just using some Flycraft yellow foam or fly foam. Razor foam would also work for some of the smaller flies. And to get this tied in, I just take the two strips here, trim off the ends so that they're nice and flush, make a couple loose wraps, and then cinch it down with a nice tight wrap. And again, this is just behind the point of the hook. Once I have those secure, I'll lay a nice thread base on the shank so that I can get a little traction when it comes to tying in my parachute. And the parachute here is just white poly. Just a simple parachute here, right over top of the hook point. A little thread dam on the front side here to help stand that up. And now, pardon my fingers, but ultimately we'll gather this all up and create a base to the parachute by just wrapping vertically up the white poly. A little bit of twist here seems to gather everything up nicely to make that effort a little easier. And that should do it right about there. The reason I lay that base is not only to make the parachute more durable, but I'll be taking my hackle here, tying the stem in just in front of the parachute itself, and now I'll secure the hackle by wrapping that stem up the parachute post. And that way when I wrap my hackle around the parachute, I can wind that down towards the fly. Okay, so we have that all secure. A little bit more of that PMD emerger Xenon dubbing for the thorax. And again, not too much, less is more. And one thing I've learned is that I'll take a wrap or two just behind the foam here just to help that taper look a little better after everything comes together. And just work that back and forth. There's a few things here to manage as you're doing so, but the more of these you tie, the quicker and simpler it gets. So right here we've got everything staged to take the foam and pull that forward. This foam here imitates the insect emerging from the exoskeleton and adds a little bit of buoyancy to my parachute, which is certainly one of the attractions to this fly. But the foam here adds a little bit of profile to the fish viewing it from underneath, and obviously that bright yellow color can imitate the PMD emerging from that nymphal shuck, and when they first come out they're pretty bright. So 3 or 4 turns of our hackle. I'll get that pulled down here, and one of my tricks to get these barbules to behave is to take a fingernail and just lay it right on top of the eye of the hook, and then that allows me to guide that thread right where it needs to go, and then I can pull everything back here, secure that down, break it off or cut it off. Kind of trim out some of my tips here for my barbules, and at this point I'm ready to whip finish. Come here, you. This is always the most enjoyable part, is pulling all those barbules out so you can get a nice clean whip finish at the head. I like to give 2 whip finishes and no head cement, but to each their own. If you want to add a little bit of cement, that's not going to hurt anything. I can take a fingernail and compress the wraps of the hackle by pushing down on the hackle and pulling up on the parachute. And there you go. There's your PFD parachute. This is just simply a parachute version of Joe Mitchell's split case nymph. That nymph is pretty productive out here in Montana, southwest Montana, in Yellowstone Park. And this parachute pattern just takes it up a few seconds further into the emergence. Hope you enjoyed, and feel free to call the shop if you have any questions. Thanks.